Hi, I'm Dave Roberts and this is Angling Escapades. Good morning and welcome to Angling Escapades on what can only be described as a bitterly cold day on the River Wye. As is the case at the moment, the weather hasn't really improved much. We've had a spell of sort of real frosty, icy snow. There's a bit of snow in the air. It's just absolutely sub-zero, freezing cold. Must be absolutely mad to be out. Monty's here. Monty's got a new coat. Look at him, doesn't he look pretty? Gotta try and keep him warm, but I didn't choose it. I wouldn't have chose that colour. I'd have chosen something like real tree or a bit of camo or something to make him look hard, but he's happy enough anyway. So yeah, so what we've done today, this is the, as promised, part 2 of the better bred special. So what I've done, I've come out of town to fish for some bigger fish. I may have chosen the wrong day. I mean, I just spoke to the bailiff in town, John, and he just said that the water temperature's hovering between 2 and 3 degrees. It's not great, you know, but what I've done today is I've come to a place where I know chub live. Now, they might not be in this peg, they might be a bit lower down, but I'm giving myself a chance. You know, it's, if you're pleasure fishing, it pays to, you know, if you know your water, go where you know they live in these sorts of conditions. If you don't, you know, travel light and move around. If you're match fishing, good luck, draw your socks off, because you know you're just not going to, these chub are going to be sat so tight. So this is the peg I've chosen, and like I say, same as last time, I've got 2 loaves of bread, 1 cheap loaf and 1 nice bit of Warburtons for the hook. Okay, so I'm going to feed it very differently to how I did last time, and that's going to take a bit of sort of preparation, so I'm going to take you through that, and then I'm going to set some rigs up and show you the rigs that I'm going to use, which again are slightly different. We're in a shallower stretch now, so we need to adjust our rigs accordingly. So let's have a look at how we prepare the bread. Okay, so with bait preparation, I say we're going to feed it a little bit differently this time. So as I said before, I've got the cheap loaf, 45p loaf, and the more expensive one. That one I don't need for now, chuck that out of the way. This is purely about feed, and like I say, the reason I feed these cheaper breads is because they've got less doughiness to them, they've got more air in them, and they tend to sort of, you know, flake out better, and just you can just do more with them, I find. And as much as they wouldn't be any good for the, you know, wouldn't be great for the hook, they're great for feeding. So literally all I do is put a whole loaf into this bowl or a bucket. I don't take anything out. Crusts and everything are going to go in there, and what I'm going to do is just spread those out evenly. Give me a little press down just so they're sort of filling up the gaps in the bowl, and all I'm going to do is just cover that with water, completely cover it with water, and again just sort of fold it in, make sure everything's submerged, everything's got a chance to take on water. And I'm just going to leave that now, and I'll leave that for about 10 minutes now, and just let all that water absorb into that bread, completely mash it up, and then I'll come back to the second part of the process. So what I'm going to do now is get some rigs set up, and I'll come back to it in a minute. Okay, so that's been soaking about 10 minutes now, so all that water's right soaked in. We've just got a sloppy mess in there. So all I'm going to do now is just transfer to a riddle, top of the riddle, and let that water just drain off there, and I'll leave that now until just before we start our session, and that'll be the last thing I have to do. So all I'm going to do is just let that any excess water just drain through that. If you haven't got a riddle with you, you can use your landing net or anything like that. It's just a case of getting that water off there. So we'll leave that until just before we start. Okay, so we've got a couple of rigs set up now. It's nice to see the sun's come out a little bit as well. That just sort of livens the spirits a little bit. So rigs, again, you know, bread fishing for me, it is just such a positive way of fishing. So there's no fancy rigs. It's all bulk rigs. You know, Don't get me wrong, you could fish it on a waggler, a big waggler, if you were trying to run across, you know, far bank trees and stuff, but generally for me it's all about top and bottom floats. But slightly different to what we've done before, where we've got real deep water. Here we've got probably, I'd say, a maximum depth of maybe 8 foot, something like that. So we don't necessarily need the big, deep, long bollo floats. So what I've set up is 2 patterns really. I've set up an 8 gram and a 10 gram float. The 8 gram float is a proper traditional, I don't think there's a float that's been in existence for longer than that, the Drennan Loafer. That's an 8 gram float, that one. Beautiful floats for this sort of game, you know, big bulbous top, you know, really visible. Obviously it's hollow, clear plastic, so the, you know, the light travels through it, so you can see that at distance. Beautiful floats, those Loafer floats, been around for years. And that is basically just shotted with SSGs or a bulk of drilled bullets, whatever you prefer. It doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be fancy, it's just about getting that bulk and getting it down. And then I've got one number 4 dropper below it. You know, like I say, very big, you know, big bait bred. You want the weight to be able to cast it out there and get it to where you want, and then you want your weight to, you know, hold it steady if you want to slow that up, and you know, and get it traveling through the peg how you want it. You've got to have control. So these are the sort of floats I'm using. And then down there I've got an 018.18 main line on here, and I've gone direct with that, and I've got on there a big old hook. That's a size 8. You know, it's an eyed pattern, but I actually tie it by, you know, like almost like a knotless knot. So I wrap down the shank a little bit, and I just find that gives it a nice little bit of presentation. And on that I'll be wrapping my piece of bread around that. Big positive, you know, there's no need for finesse. It's not, although it's cold and it's winter and getting bites is going to be at a premium, those fish, they're not seeing that line, they're not seeing that hook, they're seeing a big target bait, a big lump of bread. And we're not going to have any problems, if they're willing to feed, the diameter of our line and the size of the hook isn't really going to make a difference. So that's our first rig, and that's a light, you know, I've set up 8 and 10, and that 8 gram rig is really going to be sort of my running through rig. I'm going to sort of, you know, pretty much not slow it up too much, just run it through at various depths, and just see if I can, you know, pick fish off, you know, or if they're really active, they'll come and find it. What I've got here is you know, we're on shallow water here. I've set myself up in the water so that you know, one, it keeps me down out of this wind, this horrible easterly wind. It's coming slightly off my back and slightly downstream, but I don't want to be sat up in the air and you know, and have it affecting my line out. So so I've set myself down in the water, and then what we've got is a gully. The river generally deepens off as it goes further over, and this time of year those chub could be living in those branches under those trees, or they could just be living in the gully. And my intention is to fish, you know, over halfway basically. I don't want to go over too far straight away. You know, I'll perhaps try and fish the middle or just past middle and see if the fish are willing to sort of come out, you know, come out to play. But so my rigs are basically suited so I can get and fish far over. You know, I wouldn't catch, you know, it would be very unlikely I would catch anything this side of halfway at this time of year. You know, like I say, we fished this peg before when it's been warmer, and different story, then you can catch on stick floats and all kinds. But as it is now, any fish I catch are going to be probably around the 2/3 mark. So with that in mind, obviously I've got the 8 gram rig set up. I've also set up a bigger rig, a 10 gram float, and this is on my 6 meter bollo rod. So this is all about control. You know, as it always seems to be the way in the winter, you know, whatever you're fishing for really, it's about slowing your baits down. And this is a rig that's going to enable me to really slow it down. So what I've got on here is one of these DH balsa missiles. You know, very similar in design to the Loafer float, but this is a proper balsa float. This is going back towards the more traditional bread floats that the old boys used to use on the river, the big 12 swan things. Well, that's not quite extreme as this. This isn't quite as extreme as that, but it's a 10 gram float. It's got a real nice big visible top on it. Nice big balsa body and a bit of a shoulder as well, and I can really hold that back and slow that bait down. And with the 6 meter bollo rod as well, I can get behind it. That's the key really for slowing baits down in the winter. You want to try and you've got to get behind your float and really, you know, be able to sort of slow it down and ease it through the peg. So that's what this rig is intended to do. Again, just shotted with a bulk, simple bulk. I've got one number 4 dropper, and the same hook, size 8. Eyed pattern, real positive fishing. I have put a hook length on there just because with this one I'm more likely to be sort of maybe dragging the bottom a little bit, and I might pick up an odd snag, and I don't want to ruin my rig by losing everything. So I've put that's actually an 017 hook length, 0.17 hook length on there. Okay, so everything's set up now, rigs are set up, and it's just now a case of getting my bait sorted. So back to our bread as we were. So that's been draining on top of there for a good while. Get rid of that water. And all I'm going to do, that sodden bread, put it in the bowl. This bit is actually very satisfying, but I'm not looking forward to it today because it's so cold. But all I'm literally going to do now is just mash that up with my hands. So it's all, you can see it's all just full of water, it's all sodden. And all I'm going to do is just absolutely mash it up, get all those bits of crust and everything broken down. So it's just literally a proper mash. Oh, that's cold. I have to take 5 minutes out after this to warm my hands up, but you can see within, you know, a very short space of time I've got like a porridge there, and that's gonna, all I've got to do now is get that to a stage where I can feed it. Okay, so all I do, that's pretty good now. Still a few big lumps in there, but most of that's all soaking, most of that, all that will sink. It just makes a lovely sort of porridge. So to finish that off now, all I do, I'll take some ground bait, and for this you can use any ground bait. The ideal thing to use is use one of your half bags that you've got left over or something like that. I know some of the Welsh boys use like porridge oats, stuff like that, but unfortunately I didn't have half a bag. So all I do is I've just got some Pro Natural there, you know, the same mix I use everywhere on the river, and all I'm going to do is just add a little bit. You don't need much. I'm just going to start mixing that in, and all I'm looking to do is just for that to take on, soak into that sort of porridge, and just take some of the moisture away. I don't want it dry. I just want it so it'll just form a ball so I can get it into a catapult. So as with any sort of mixing of ground bait, you've got to, you know, give it time for that water to get absorbed up. You don't want it to go too much of a stodge. You can see now it's starting to thicken up, and it's just a pure bread mix. And again, you know, the potency of bread is such that you can't, you know, you're not going to feed too much of this, especially on a day like today. But you know, the key with this is that when this hits the water, you know, it splashes on the water and it explodes out and puts all those pieces through the water, and you know, creates a real sort of cloud and sends bits off down the river, and it's a real, you know, it'll, like today where I'm going to be running through and searching for these fish. You know, the fish I'm fishing for today, they might be sat 100 yards downstream, but eventually some of that will get to them and they'll be able to follow that trail up to hopefully where my bait's entering the water. So it's getting somewhere near, it's getting into the, you know, that's still too slow, that wouldn't go out in a catapult, so just give it a minute just to absorb a bit more, but it's getting close now. And I say, what that'll do, that'll hit the water and just explode. There we go, so that's somewhere near now. I reckon if I rest that for a couple of minutes now, that'll be just about perfect. Right, I need to warm my hands up now. So I'm going to warm my hands up and then we can actually get on with some fishing. Okay, so we're ready to go now. I've got everything ready. My bread's mixed up nicely now. That's forming up nicely. I've got my catapult so I can fire that out. But to start with, I'm not going to feed. The reason for that is there's a chance here that these fish, you know, like I say, I know they live in this area, so there's a chance they could be sat there quite happily just living there. And if I start piling a load of bait into them, then we could spook them. So what I always do in this sort of, you know, this sort of area and these sort of pegs is I like to have a couple of casts first, a few runs through on the bread, and just see if I can just see if there's anything sat there, and you can sometimes get a couple of early bites. You know, and key is not to sort of spook the fish. So I can start feeding, and when I do feed, I probably won't feed right over. I'll probably feed halfway, and try and attract, you know, get those fish to come to the feed as opposed to sort of feeding right on top of where they live. So I'm going to set that up to about 7 foot to start with. I think that'd be about right. So it's not much deeper than that. So I've got my Warburtons ready to go. Put that out of the way and just get a couple of slices ready for the hook. Sun's out, which is just just what we need, because it's absolutely bitter. The wind is just horrible. So I'm going to, using quite a decent piece of bread on there. I'll leave a bit of the hook point showing. That's a good piece of flake on there. Big visible bait that the fish are going to see. And what I'll do is just sort of cast this out a bit further than I need to go to start with. There we go. I say I'm not going to feed straight away. I'm just going to have a few runs through and just see what's going on. It's nice when that sun's out. You can really see that float clearly. So wind's quite kind today. It's coming off my back, off my shoulder a little bit. So don't have to do much with the line to keep behind the float. I'm just going to run that through. Just give it a little hold up occasionally. Just slow it down and just let it run. So I just want to have a little search around, just see what's about, see if anything's there before I commit to putting bait in, because it's winter fishing, the water temperature very low. Just you wouldn't expect it to be a bag up today, so you've got to adjust your feeding accordingly. That's probably about as far as I can go. I can't see the float much past that. It's probably gone down 40 yards. I'll bring that back. So I'm quite happy to have a couple of runs through like that, just see if there's anything about. So again, good sized piece of bread. I lost it in the glare a little bit then. The trouble is, when it's as welcome as this sun is, it creates, when there's ripple on the water, obviously it makes that float hard to see, and there isn't much really, not much answer to it really. You've just got to sort of go with it and let it sometimes keep checking the float, keep sort of holding back. That always shows you where the float is, and sometimes you're only just watching a shape as it goes through the water. That float's going through there nice. That's the 8 grammer, and that's well, I'm not slowing it up much, but it's certainly it's controlling things nicely. I feel like it's going through at a good pace. And of course, although I'm not feeding at the moment, I am feeding in the sense that every time I strike and come back, that bread's coming off the hook. There'll be a few bits coming off it, so I am feeding in a sense, just not big amounts. But importantly, I'm not damaging the peg before I've started. It's just tricky to see there, just in that bit of glare. Oh, it's nice that sun though. I do like that. Nothing there. So I think what I'll do this time, just add another sort of half a foot of depth on there, just to get it somewhere towards the bottom. And I say these, these chub, if they're there and they're sat there, they could be sat at any depth. They could be sat, 4 feet off bottom, but you just got to keep searching. Okay, so I've had about 10 runs through there, and without feeding anything, and I've gone through the depths a little bit. I've gone down till I've been sort of dragging on along the bottom. I've not had a bite, so now I'm going to start feeding. And like I say, it's not like you're putting a bombardment in. I'm just going to put the ball in to start, just to get some of that bread out there. You know, these balls are going to explode on impact really. Some of it will sink to the bottom, but lots of it leaves a cloud in the water. So it's just a case of just getting it out there. Don't want to go right over, just over halfway. You know, because if those fish are sitting right over, if I feed it halfway, you know, or just past, you know, towards 2/3, I'll try and draw them out. What I don't want to do is if they are sitting there and they're not in the mood for feeding, I don't want to then just fill them up with bread. So it's a case of just easing into it gently, you know, just putting a little bit, you know, that bread will travel. There's so many bits and a cloud coming off, that'll travel a long way. And hopefully draw fish. If they're not in front of me, it certainly draw them from downstream. I'm having to watch a rod tip now, John. I'm having to watch a rod tip for a bite because I can't see the float in that. There'd be no colour afloat you'd see in that, you know what I mean? Oh, I've been fishing about an hour and 3/4 now, and I haven't had a bite. And I haven't had a bite over my feed. And I've just started creeping over to the far side, fishing right further over towards the trees. See if that's where the, you know, if that's where the fish are sitting. And not a sign, but the way the sun's come up, it's made it really tricky to see that float. So what I've done is I've gone up the bank and I've changed to a DH number 3. Which is a proper bollo float, which I say I wouldn't really ideally like to use for these. I like those short loafer style floats, but the big thing for me is in this tricky light is, you know, this has got a big hollow tip, which I can sort of see a bit better in that sun. So hopefully, not that I think I was missing any bites, but at least now I feel, you know, I'm watching the float properly, and if I do get a bite, I'll be on it. But it's certainly slow. It's what you'd expect of a river that's the water temperature is 2 degrees or whatever it is. There we go. Put it right over there. That's better, I can see that a bit better. Worst part of it is when the sun's out and you get a ripple on the water and you get that horrible, you just can't see anything. It wouldn't matter what colour your float was, you just can't see it. There you go, at least I can see it now. I have to say the sun is welcome today because it is bitter cold. Well, another hour passed without a bite. The sun was a nightmare trying to see the float through the ripple and the glare on the water. I was freezing cold. The camera equipment was playing up and batteries were running out faster than normal due to the extreme cold. And I was thinking it might be time to call a day on the project and leave it for another time. But the sun just started to drop in the sky a little bit, and you just felt that as the wind dropped, I could see my float clearly, and you just felt that this may be the time of day that I could get a bite. Well, it's taken an awful long time. For the last hour I've just been running it along that far bank tree line. Eventually it's gone under. I've just been slipping a little bit of bait in, not going mad by any stretch, just keeping a little bit flowing through. It doesn't feel like a big fish, but it's a fish. Which was looking prime for a blank at one stage. What is it? Oh, nice big chub, look at that. Obviously quite lethargic at the moment because it's so cold, but I'll tell you what, that's a proper lump, that is. Call me under that cold, I can't get older. Wattled up in mud when we landing it's been, the hook's gone through the net. It's all happening. Well, there we go. Perseverance paid off. A chub of maybe £4. Let's see if he's got any bread in him. No. Freezing cold. Well, it's a bite. I'm happy with that, because it was looking like a blank. So let's see if we can catch another one. You go in the net, matey. Well folks, I think that'll have to do. Light's going now, temperature's plummeting, it's freezing. The rod rings have been freezing up there at the end. So anyway, so I hope you've enjoyed this. Rock hard day, but we've caught some fish, and I've shown you my way with bread in the wilder stretches and to catch these bigger chubs. So hope you've picked a few tips up, and yeah, we'll keep them coming. I don't know what we're going to do next time, but we'll come up with something, I'm sure. And keep subscribing, keep your wonderful comments coming, and we'll see you next time.